So.
Was it a documented thing?
Oh, it was in the minutes, and it was all part of. It was all part of the discussion. I was okay. We're going to have this windfall. What are we going to do with the money? How long is it going to last? And that was one of the areas where we cut back significantly in order to balance the budget. And so,
because the other one is
unfunded liability. So if you want to live for the moment, you take care of your sidewalks. If you want to plan it for the future, you start funding your unfunded liability a little bit, which holds us a good step with the bonding company.
Perhaps it would be worthwhile, as a follow-up on this one. Now we basically we're approaching town meeting with a balanced budget. We've got a fair amount of reserves going into next year. We haven't closed out the year, so we don't know what next year's free cash is going to be. And we also, which is a function of, what our what our local receipts actually end up at the end of the year. We also, we don't know, this is a question, Greg, maybe to get an answer from the collector, as if we look at our commitments of real estate taxes, we've had a number of delinquencies, although it hasn't impacted the budget because it's a lien, but if we're in a recovery mode, meaning that number's going down, then we'll actually have additional cash in hand. And it would be worthwhile trying to take a look at what the trend is and then make some decisions, maybe going into the October town meeting, if we can afford to put some money into these other areas.
And again, there's a whole host of areas in town where we have some gaps just in the sidewalks. If you think of Haverhill Street from Foley Drive to North Street, not a long section of road, but still pretty heavily traveled by pedestrians and joggers.
Sure.
But there's all these little gaps around town. Some of them we've been able to close with some assistance of utilities as we did Ipswich Park and Chestnut Central and Haverhill Street. You can actually walk all the way around. But that took a concerted effort on our part, working with Reading Municipal Light and other utilities to make sure that those things can accomplish. The sidewalk situation, they are deteriorating. We need to throw a little bit something at it, and if we can have a revenue source like this, where even though we're not going to commit to all that we need, a portion of it, that would be good. And again, getting back to the unfunded liability, we haven't made an attempt at it at all.
Yeah, and I brought that up at our last meeting, that I still think we need to have a concerted effort to start making some kind of savings towards that account.
We've been talking about that for a lot of years, and but unfortunately, with
I think it's a
needs to maintain services, the majority of the board has felt that that's what we need to do. So I don't disagree that.
I just want to acknowledge Greg's effort, Elizabeth's effort, and the entire accounting team to try to find a solution to this year's budget gap, and also to pay some attention to maintaining some of these reserves. So, we could have finished a lot worse.
Oh, we can empty the accounts. There's no doubt about it.
But we're not done yet, right?
Close.
Who's that? There's a lot on here that we haven't covered.
What would you like to talk about?
Oh, for some reason you started with 7, but you never talked about 1 through 6.
Well, I think he skipped them because we had discussed them in the past.
We talked about them at that meeting 3 weeks ago.
Well, we haven't made a decision on number 1.
Okay.
Or number 2, excuse me, number 2.
That's fine. Hopefully we can make a decision on it fairly
We
quickly.
just make a decision.
We've talked about it.
Okay.
Let's just make a decision.
Let's start with number 1. Okay.
Right.
Are there any issues with number 1 from anybody? So number 2, I don't think the issue is the number. It's where it's going in the budget. Correct?
Correct.
Okay.
Well, I've already said my piece. I'm not in favor of this.
Okay.
I think the accountability needs to stay with the department heads. I think the way we have our finance department has managed this in past years, and I don't think they've ever had a real big issue with it, from my understanding. And I've tried to do some research with other towns. I don't know any other town that's doing it this way. I haven't found anybody yet. and I don't like the idea of pulling it all together. I think we got to hold these departments accountable and not put all that responsibility on the DPW director. I don't think it's right. I also, matter of fact, I think we need to make a bigger stand in regards to fuel. We need to get input, the effort on the department heads to talk about conservation, what they're going to do, to have a strategy. I'm not even in favor of increasing the fuel budget this year, even though the rates are going up, because I think we should put the onus on the department heads to figure this out before we go and just give them more money. Because I think there's things we can do. I think the DPW probably can have a little strategy on maybe manning up less trucks and having 1 or 2 trucks running around with one guy in it to go to a job when you have 3 or 4 showing up. There's probably a good reason for it. I'm just throwing out an example that we need to start here and force it downward, that there has to be a concerted effort for conservation, and I think we can do a better job at it rather than just increase fuel. Because you know what? It's not going to get any cheaper.
I'm not increasing it. All I'm looking to do is allocate it into a single consolidated department. I think I've talked about this 2 or 3 times. I'd appreciate the board making a decision on it. I think we've talked about this thing until we're blue in the face.
Yeah, I agree.
If we make a decision, I'd like that, and we can move on.
I thought the majority had concurred as to we're going to move forward with the proposal. But yeah, maybe
That's what I recall. Yeah.
Really?
Yeah.
Yeah, that was
Jeez.
that was my understanding.
I see nothing wrong with
Okay.
putting it all in one budget. I do agree with you that there should be an effort to conserve in light of the fact that energy cost is going up.
And then it's not going to change for the foreseeable future. So that means we have to change.
I think that it's based on the numbers. The one question I would have of you, Greg, is these dollar amounts are based on some price that we can then calculate into some estimated gallonage.
Yeah, and we haven't even made an adjustment to this right now because its fuel prices
just
are
a
a
number.
crapshoot.
Just a number.
No, it's status quo. It's maintenance of the status quo.
Yes, but the price of fuel
We understand.
has changed.
We understand.
So I'm not sure what the status quo would be. X number of gallons of gas. Now, I mean, if you want to use these numbers at today's price and say this is the amount of gallons, I don't care. But there ought to be a baseline.
Okay. What else would you like to do with regard to fuel?
No, I think you have a consensus as far as
Okay.
how you're going to
Do we
allocate
have
it. But as far as the
consensus?
dollar,
You have a 3 to 2. I agree with Michael.
Okay.
I think it should be the onus should be on each department head to manage their budgets.
I'm not
Okay.
trying to take that away.
But I agree with Mr. Messeri in terms of I don't know how you go status quo with the dollar amounts with the increase in fuel cost over the last year.
Goes up and it goes down. We have opportunities to address it at a later date. If prices rise remarkably, we'll come back and we'll say we need more money
But
for
they
fuel.
have since last year.
I guess we have
This
to
is
go
why I
back-
don't think we solved it. We had this discussion at our last meeting.
Oh,
I'm sorry.
I hope we have solved it, Michael, because we've spent about 2 hours talking about the fuel budget.
Right.
And we've talked more about the fuel budget than I've ever seen in my
Right.
life, frankly.
I guess
do that.
I'd go back to, based on the amount that we put in the budget last year, are we going to end the year in a shortfall of dollars in the fuel budget? My understanding was we were. Yes.
It's too early to predict. We're not in a deficit right now.
We're not in a deficit.
We're not in a deficit right now.
But where are you? You're 10 months into the year. I mean, you need to know. You must know where you are in terms of how much has been expended in fuel cost.
We're
Tell
not.
what?
We're not in a deficit position yet. You're asking me a number. I'll get you that number tomorrow, Sean. I don't have it tonight. I'd be more than happy to get it to you.
I guess it's not necessary to have it tonight or tomorrow. The question that I'm asking is based on where we are this year, based on what we budgeted for dollars,
Okay.
and what our burn rate seems to be, are we going to finish the year whole or not? If not, maybe we need to look at putting additional gallons and dollars in here. And then what I'd like to do is say, on a budget estimate point of view, what does this amount of gallons of fuel represent? What is the dollar amount relate to gallons of fuel. Does that mean, we've all agreed that the price can go up or down, and what we really like to do is to focus on the gallons that we're burning, and then if we're going to do anything in efficiency, the goal is to reduce not the dollars that we're spending, but the gallons that we're consuming.
Right.
Well, that's the only way you're going to reduce the dollar.
Yeah, of course.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
And I'm a believer that in the past, I don't think we've really put a lot of time and effort into conserving fuel. I think it's really easy to just jump in a vehicle and go off and do whatever you got to do, and maybe there needs to be a little more managing on the department head's part. Look at their vehicles that they're using, the jobs they have to accomplish that particular day or week, and how they can maybe attack it with using less vehicles or less costly or gallon burning vehicles.
So can I offer this as kind of middle ground? Is that if we have a number for gallon, and we should have numbers for gallons used by department, right?
Mm-hmm.
You want to say to the department heads, your budget is 5% less in gallons of fuel, and leave the dollars in there because we don't know what we're going to be spending in dollars for those gallons of fuel, as a method of trying to create some incentive to.
What are you saying? Shortchanging us with an arbitrary percentage across the
I'm
board?
not in favor of that.
I'm not in favor of that either, personally. But is that what you're proposing?
I'm saying if I know, for example, DPW burns, I don't know,
They use 100 gallons, whatever it is.
100 gallons,
Right.
right? And we think that, and we provide an incentive for using less. And we measure it, but right now you can't measure it because you're dealing with a dollar amount that's all over the place. How can you hold anybody accountable for that?
When you just look at gallons,
Right, exactly.
that's all you do.
Greg, I know you're frustrated over this subject. Okay?
I just want to move on, Mike.
I know you do.
I want a decision,
But-
and let's move on.
But it's $100,000, okay, and it's only going to grow. And I do have an issue with the way we approach fuel, and I don't like that we're going to pull it, okay? But it's something that we have to manage, and I think the department heads have to be forced to manage it. Now, look at this whole budget overall. They're actually incentivized to spend every dollar that's in their budget. You can ask any one of your department heads, and if they were going to be truly honest with you, they'd look you right in the eye and say, yeah, I do everything I can to spend every dollar because I know next year if I don't, you guys are going to cut it back. So they're actually incentivized to spend it. I hate the way we do this. This is ridiculous, but it's the way we do it. I can't fix it. I wish it wasn't this way, but I don't think anybody's going to argue with me at this table that what I just said is not correct. You've been around a long time. Am I wrong or am I right?
I don't know. I
No.
see turnbacks in
I've seen
general
turnbacks
government
from
every year.
many departments every year.
Okay,
So
but you
I don't agree.
Okay.
No, I don't agree because we do see turnbacks.
All
We do
right.
see department heads managing their budgets well and turn money back at the end of the year.
But most in general will spend every dollar they have because I think they're fearful that if they don't spend it, they won't get it next year. It goes along with what you're saying. Build an incentive in there, reduce the amount of gallons they burn, and how do we do that? I don't know. Maybe this is an area that
What's
we
the
actually want to bring
What's the
consultant.
incentive, though? And we'll let you
I
buy
don't
more
know.
pencils?
I don't know what it is.
I think a better approach would be to ask, suggest to Greg that he have a discussion with department heads and have them come back with some ideas of how they could save some fuel.
Stevie, it's not a joke.
We can't make,
No,
Because fuel is really becoming expensive.
I know
in this town,
It's
people
expensive
every day have a struggle to fill their vehicles. And you know what? We should also take the same approach as the residents that pay these bills.
Right. And I
I
think we do.
Greg and I had this discussion a few weeks ago about police cars, right? And unfortunately, it's the kind of market. Police car is a certain kind of beast. There was an article. Was it in the Globe or where was I reading it? There was, there's three vehicles now. There's the Ford, which is it's
Interceptor.
The Taurus?
Excuse me,
call
Bob.
it an Interceptor, but it's
Excuse me, Mr.
really
Chair.
the Taurus modified. I guess.
Excuse me, Mr. Chair.
Is it-
Can I ask you to kind of turn this way?
sure, I'm
and,
sorry.
Yeah,
Oh,
it's like it's a private little conversation over there, and I want to be part of it.
Then there's a Chevrolet now that evidently they're coming out with, and of course there's the Dodge Charger.